Hey everybody, and welcome to some more tabletop RPG horror story cringe with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a tale about a dungeon master whose ambitions are a tad too far out of reach. A story about a creep that gets way too close to a young player at a Pathfinder event, and much more. But before we get into those, let's prepare for the incoming psychic damage with a Super Simba close-up. There we go. Now, with that done, let's get into these stories. A tale of an overly controlling host that lost his players before we sat down. By Reddit user, Father of Wolves. In my late high school years, some members of my friend group had started a very casual and light conversation on D&D. I was mostly talking about what we thought of it, and if we'd ever get into it. He didn't show up until later in the conversation, but one friend, we'll call him Host, was bouncing with joy hearing us talk about D&D. He told us that he was a fan of the game, but never had the opportunity to get people to play it. Seeing the opportunity, he pitched to our group if we wanted, he could DM his own homebrew campaign, and we could be his players. And 3 of us agreed, including me. Right then and there, he created a group chat for us. And here, he discussed all of his plans and fantasies for the game. Aside from Host, we were all completely fresh to the game and had only vague ideas on where to start. He didn't give us anything aside from read the manuals, and I did just that. I got my hands on a 5th edition player's handbook and printed out some character sheets for the 2 others. After going through the book, I figured a paladin would be fun and planned to go with Oath of the Ancients. I told Host about this, and he said that I can't do that, because paladins can't be druids. I pointed out that I got this from the player's handbook. If it's written there, surely it's permitted. Though his reply was, "This is my game, and I say paladins can't be druids." He never elaborated more on that, and refused to allow this character. Friend 2, however, was treated very differently. She went with a young elf ranger, and she made it very clear that she wore tattoos instead of clothes. This wouldn't have been so bad if she didn't grossly over-sexualize this character on top of that. I tried to voice my discomforts to Host, hoping that he could rein her in a bit, but he told me off for being a prude about it. To this day, I still don't understand why he allowed this favoritism. Well, my friend, there is a simple explanation for that. It didn't take more than a week, but we had done about all we could as players to prepare for the campaign. Host insisted that he was still prepping and we'd need to wait a bit longer. He planned to make his own physically drawn maps, towns, NPCs, monsters. Everything would be his own unique creation. The issue was, he was taking weeks to do this. He was so fixated on his ambition that he didn't see that we were losing interest. After almost 2 months of waiting on him, we gave him an ultimatum. We either start within the next week from that point, or there isn't going to be anyone for his game. Host was not happy about this at all, but he made this one single compromise to make it happen. In the group chat, he posted what would happen. Our characters would be starting at each end of the world, and we'd be meeting in a set place after he puts us through our own mini-campaigns. Each session would be focused on one character at a time, and he expected everyone to be at his house for every session, no excuses. No one was into this idea, as it meant that 2 people would have nothing to do, and we all thought that we'd be starting together. Though he wouldn't take no for an answer. I asked how long these sessions would be, and he said about 9 hours each. I think in that moment, all of us knew the kind of hell we'd be in for if we agreed to this. So my friends and I dropped out right there. He tried to guilt trip us back in for the next few days after, but that wasn't happening. We had much better things to do than sit around and use all of our free time on this nightmare. Well, it sounds to me like the prospective DM's campaign collapsed under the weight of his own ambition. The problem was that he wanted to do an epic story with characters that had extensive backgrounds before they all met up. Though the thing about players is, they want to actually play the game. Now, I can understand hosting a small session 0.5 type of thing with each player to get them to the destination where they would meet up with the other party members. But to ask them to participate in personal mini-campaigns is a really big ask, especially considering the DM required the other players to sit and watch during 9-hour sessions. That is just unrealistic to expect people to do that. So that, combined with taking months to even consider starting the game, it's no surprise that things didn't go forward. Hopefully OP and the other players eventually got into a game, but with a dungeon master that didn't bite off more than they could chew. Let's move on. Neckbeard DM by Reddit user Velocity Rachel. My husband, Jay, and I are planning a trip later in the month for my 30th birthday, but I wanted to do something fun but cheap on the day of. We've lived in our current city for a short time, so I decided to try a board game cafe and try the Adventurers League. It was a cheap and fun way to spend my birthday. The Dungeon Master on the Discord told us level 8, so I rolled up a Paladin, and my husband rolled up a Bard. The DM told us nothing about the campaign though. No setting, no gear to expect, no class requests, nothing. I told him that we have experience in normal campaigns, but neither of us had done Adventures League before. We got there, and the DM was a guy who had probably just turned 21. He was drinking, but looked super young. The other player looked to be about 19 or 20 though. We were setting up when the first red flag appeared. Jay was talking about his bard and how he wanted to run a campaign of all bards with different schools of magic, like a sort of traveling band. The DM responded with, "Oh, so you want an orgy?" Huh? What? I tried to laugh it off with a, "I guess it depends if they're on stage or not." But he responded to that with, "No, it's an orgy." I'm not dumb. We all know the horny bard D&D trope, but it's only been about 5 minutes since we met this guy. The other player was really quiet and hard to hear, but he and the DM were clearly friends, and all he really said about his character was that it was a moon goddess worshipping cleric that used to be addicted to cocaine. This elicited another, okay moment. So we get going, and Jay went to cast his first spell. And before he even got a chance to roll, the DM said that it missed. He didn't even ask what Jay's spell DC was, just that it missed and moved on to the other player, his friend. My turns were especially weird, as my paladin always seemed to be out of reach of enemies, or missed on hits, no matter how high I rolled. The DM also said that since Adventurers League characters are supposed to switch between adventures, that it gave him free reign to quote-unquote mess with us. My character kept getting knocked out or falling over, and at one point, he said that I slipped down a hill. So I told him that since my shield was out, that I'll use it like a sled to catch myself. I whiffed on the roll, which is fine, but what was weird is when my character got up and took the damage, he proceeded to make me roll to pick up my shield 4 different times, saying that I kept dropping it on my feet and taking damage while giggling. It was funny at first, but this kind of thing kept happening over and over again, to me in particular. So we're playing, and it's pretty loud in the cafe. The DM was at the head of the table, with myself on his right side, and the other player across from me, on his left. Jay was next to me, furthest from the DM, and he has bad hearing. So when I went to go grab our order during the other player's turn, I told him to switch seats with me. Unfortunately, this gave the DM a better view of my chest, which he proceeded to stare at whenever it was my turn. Thus began the night of weird misogyny. I told the DM that I had just rolled up the Paladin that afternoon, and that it was my first time playing as one. He responded with, "Oh, so you've never played D&D before?" Even though I literally just told him that both my husband and I have been playing for years, Jay as both a player and DM. We have just never done Adventurers League before. I just wasn't used to the character yet, and was still learning my spells. He took my sheet and said that I rolled the character's HP wrong because I didn't use the Adventurers League character guide. I didn't know that there was one. So both Jay and I roll up normal characters from the player's handbook. Something that would have been nice to know when I mentioned that it would be our first time playing Adventurers League on Discord earlier. He got annoyed with me for doing it wrong, but was fine with my husband. Weird that. The cherry on top of the night was when we were done and packing up. This kid had the actual balls to ask us for a ride home. Both Jay and I are way too nice for our own good, so we gave him the ride. The entire time, he was in the back seat asking when he would see us again, because the league needed more players and they never seemed to get any new ones. Needless to say, but when we dropped him off and drove away, we both burst out laughing. Like, my dude, the call is coming from inside the house. Yeah, for the DM to do all that, like telling Jay that his spells failed without any rolls or asking for DC, and having OP's character be a bumbling idiot, one has to wonder why the DM wouldn't know why he has trouble getting players for his games. That mixed with the creepiness of him just staring at OP's chest when she switched seats with her husband, and acting like OP was stupid for not doing something that they weren't told about. I'd say it's pretty reasonable why OP and her husband wouldn't want to go to that game anymore. Let's move on. And before we get into this next one, I need to give you all a content warning, as this following story contains SA. So, if you would like to skip it, you can go to this time code here. But with that said, let's get into it. Disgusting Creep Gets Touchy at Pathfinder Society Event by Reddit user TrashDragon35. So I've been watching YouTube of this stuff and decided to share my own incident, and maybe it'll warn some people about what's out there. Anyways, I have been playing tabletop RPGs since I was at least 8, starting with DnD 3.5, and moving on to Pathfinder. I was about 12 when this incident with Creepy, we'll call him, takes place, and trigger warnings for SA of a minor, if it isn't obvious where this is going. Anyways, I'm at a gaming, sci-fi, nerd stuff convention for the weekend with my parents, and some of my buddies from Scouts, who were also in my home game at the time. Our parents kinda just turned us all loose since they knew a lot of these people from decades ago, so it seemed safe enough. We all looked at the program list and decided to play Pathfinder Society, which, for those who don't know, is Pathfinder's organized play thing. Think Adventurers League, but for Pathfinder. Since we're all new to Pathfinder Society and didn't want to play any pre-gens, we got sat at this level 1 to 2 table. There were 6 people at the table, and this was going to be a run in 3 sessions over the course of the day. I don't really remember all the characters, and honestly, it's not really that relevant, except for the part where me and my buddies decided that we were all tiefling street urchins who ran away from a local orphanage. Also relevant is that all of our characters are children, because, well, we were children, so it made sense to us at the time. So anyways, the group was really nice and welcoming, and they took us under their wing and explained what was going on. Cue Creepy, who is playing an anime-type sensei, who, of course, he gave a stereotypical accent. Anyway, he decides that it's his duty to protect us and be a father, since our real parents didn't love us enough to keep us. And since I was seated next to him, I got all the attention. Creepy would make all kinds of weird comments about my character and my buddies' characters as well, but at the time, we didn't really see what was going on. At one point in the adventure, the group ended up getting separated by a trap, so at this point, now it's me and my buddies in a lower level, and the rest of the group above. Looking back on it, I think the GM was picking up on some of the vibes from Creepy, and decided it would be good to keep the characters separated. Anyways, the tiefling orphans are lost in the sewers, when we come across a small creature that looks like a brain with lion legs. Now, I may not have all the monsters in Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder at that point, but I knew the nasty ones, and I knew that thing was an intellect devourer. At that point, the tiefling orphans decided to do the smart thing and noped the duck out of there. And I was having a freak out because the GM was really playing it up with the "I'm going to eat your brain" thing. That's when creepy devolves into touchy because he started to get physical. He started rubbing my shoulders, saying that it was going to be okay and how he wouldn't let anything happen to me. Ugh, that would make anyone uncomfortable, especially a kid. It all was really weird, and he never really stopped it after I calmed down. He kept rubbing my shoulder and saying things like that. When the game went on lunch break for the day, before I left to meet up with my parents, he said that I was really handsome. Okay, this dude is really starting to earn his name of creepy. That's when I started to clue in to maybe something wasn't right, because here's a total stranger getting touchier than my parents, and now he's saying things that basically only my grandma ever said. But at that point, I just assumed that he was weird but harmless. Boy, was I wrong. After we got back from break for the evening session and end of the adventure, the two groups met up again, with me and my buddy's characters running into the other party members, blubbering about, "Help, the brain thing wants to eat our brains." And into combat we go. Things quickly bogged down into attrition, that honestly we would have lost. But while everyone was distracted by trying to figure out how to actually deal with this thing at level 1, that was when Creepy saw his opportunity and straight up grabbed my crotch. Oh, what the fuck? That really freaked me out, but I just went into complete shutdown. I really didn't know what to do. I was now really scared of the guy, so I made up some reason why I needed to switch seats with one of the other adults. The game ended, and my mom came back to pick me and my buddies up, and the second that I was next to her, I told her that Creepy said creepy things and grabbed my crotch. Well, she got me and my buddies out of there quick, and I didn't really learn what happened after that until years later. The whole thing scared me away from Pathfinder for years, until I finally met a good group in college. Holy God, I really hope that that piece of crap was reported and not allowed near any kids ever again. This just goes to show that there are some really twisted sickos out there. And the moment the DM noticed that OP was looking uncomfortable next to that degenerate, he should have had them move away from him instead of just separating the characters in the game. Or hell, just remove him from the game entirely. Especially when that dude started to rub OP's shoulders. Just that right there should have been called out and that dude removed from not only the game, but the convention center. I really wish that OP would have posted what happened after he told his mom about what happened. But for my own sanity, I'm just going to have my headcanon be that he was arrested, charged, and on a watch list. Seriously, there are some super sick individuals out there. And remember, if anything like that ever happens to you, go tell someone right away. I really hate to think that that monster is still out there somewhere. I really think that we are in a dire need of a kitty palate cleanser after that story. There, that is a little better, but I still have psychic damage from that one. Let's move on, and considering it's Friday, and especially considering that previous story, I think that we are in a dire need of this week's glory story. Party used a, so I thought, useless magic item to escape a pickpocketing heist. By Reddit user, Professor Lugia. So, two of my players, an elf wizard and a Yuan-ti ranger who is a rogue in spirit, decided to pickpocket some patrons from a tavern. Original, I know. And in our second ever session, I gave them an announcer's cloak of invisibility, which turns the user invisible, but their every move is narrated by an omnipresent voice while they wear it. I thought it was a funny, but overall useless item, because anyone could hear, "He's approaching to pickpocket you," etc. So my Yanti successfully robbed a goblin patron while they were distracted by my elf wizard, who used minor illusion to make a small fire. He ran into the bathroom, adorned the cloak, and stood perfectly still when they chased him in. Per the item's description, if he wasn't moving, it had nothing to narrate. So he was able to evade them, and then bum-rushed the exit. So even though the patrons heard, "He's moving towards the exit. He's moving through the tables," no one could see him, so he was able to slip into a crowd and run away. Overall, a hilarious heist that should not have worked as well as it did. Well, that is one way to perform a heist. And I have to say that the players made great use out of a joke item. I just imagine a person wearing that and having the voice from the Stanley Parable narrating everything they do. Though, I do have to be that guy a bit and say that the DM could have had the cloak say something like, "The ranger stood on the back of the toilet in the hopes that his pursuers would not notice an invisible Yanti there." But I say good on the DM for allowing the players that win. But that will do it for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free.
And with that, Doge wrapped up the video.
Who the hell is that?